Spear Through the Heart is a very tantalizing title. You reach it, you want to grab it, but you can't touch it. But you feel it very deeply within you. The power of love that Haacaaluu had for his people and that his people had for him. That's very deeply felt. You can't touch it, but it's there. You see it, you feel it deeply. You also feel the power of hate that by which Haacaaluu was murdered so brutally and his life cut short. That too sends a dagger through the heart. It sends a lance through the heart. So you feel it both in the love, in the power of love, and in the power of hate. So the title really captures both, and I'm very, very impressed by that. The film itself is a very good, a wonderful achievement on its own. It tells the history, what is at the heart of the churning empire. What is churning the empire, the Ethiopian empire? Why is it convulsing now? It really goes to the heart of what Haacaaluu is trying to tell us. The injustices on which the empire itself is built is what's churning it. The sleeping giant is not sleeping anymore. It has been awoken. The sleeping giant of the Oromo is awake now. It's wide awake and it's shaking off the empire. That's what's convulsing the empire. That's what's churning the empire. And Haacaaluu is trying to tell us that. The injustices of ages. And he's trying to tell us the memory of his people. He's trying to keep it alive. So the film really captures that aspect of Haacaaluu's work and legacy. I really, really appreciated that. It is very, very powerful. And I really loved how his wife, Fantu, is front and center of the film. I really liked that. And, not just Fantu, but the women who never get mentioned when heroes like Haacaaluu or any other heroes are celebrated. The women they just stay in the shadows. This film actually brought Fantu out of the shadow and make her shine in her own right. I really liked that as well. And I loved how the young people were coming out and how their views were incorporated. Who listens to young people? We don't listen to our young people, but here they have their own space, they have their own voice, they're being heard and seen. I loved that part as well, how young people actually were placed at the center, because Haacaaluu's life is a young life cut short, and how that impacts on everybody, on all Oromos and other people who are really justice seekers and lovers of peace and justice. But particularly that murder, that assassination, had a very particular impact on the young people. And that we don't get to see that, because we always see our own pain, our own wounds, and don't get to listen to the young people. And I really liked how the young voices came out and took their rightful place in this film. I like that. But I also like how the older and the younger, how Haacaaluu's life and Haacaaluu's work affects people from across generations, not just across generations within the Oromo, but across other nations and nationalities as well. And that also came out in this film. So I really liked that, in that sense of it all. So I just want to say congratulations to the people who created this film and the team that surrounds it and that worked so hard It took 2 years to come here. So I really appreciate that. And when it comes to what this film contributes, I think this film is an archive by itself. Just linking this to what's archived. Ethiopian historiography, Ethiopian archives never tell the story of Oromos the way this film would tell. So this in itself, in its own right, becomes an archive of Haacaaluu's life. How the bits and pieces that were lost in this news item and this news and this analysis and this article in a scholarly journal or whatever, all of those are brought together and created like a monument for Haacaaluu. So that piece itself is an archive, how it is archived and how it documents the struggles of the people, not just the individual. And what Haacaaluu is trying to tell us is the story of his people, the struggles of his people, the injustice that's happening on his people. That's what is coming out in one piece, in one project. It comes out and it really builds Haacaaluu's legacy into one project. There will be many projects, but this is a wonderful, wonderful archiving of Haacaaluu's legacy, Haacaaluu's works. I really, in terms of Najat Hamza's comment, I appreciated that very much as well, because she's really putting her finger on something that is missing, that has been missing in Ethiopian historiography. We're not, that document, that how the Ethiopianist historiography documents Ethiopian history is not in ways that we, as Oromos or as other nations and nationalities that came into that empire through conquest and bloodshed, it's not meant for us to learn from it, from Ethiopian historiography. We're meant to be erased. Our memories, our cultures, our history is supposed to be repressed and erased from the face of the earth. That's what Ethiopian historiography did to our culture and whatever. And Najat is putting her hand on that. So I think when it comes to archiving, this particular project, this particular film, Spear Through the Heart, really does the work of archiving. So that collective memory is what Haacaaluu is trying to keep alive, and that's what came out in this film for me. And in terms of my own assessment of Haacaaluu's work, I don't want to make it a critique of this film, because this film has a purpose. It had a purpose. It had an angle through which it looked. It had a lens through which it looked at Haacaaluu's life. I may choose to look at Haacaaluu's life in a different lens, but it's not a critique of this film. There were things that I would have liked to do, if I were the filmmaker. I would have liked to look at, for example, the ways in which Haacaaluu's work is continuing today. His artistic peers have been picking up from where he left off and running with it, and the youngest kids, the small kids in the countryside are singing his songs, and the social media is full of those. I would like to see those, because that's the continuity. It has spread like wildfire. Haacaaluu's message has spread like wildfire, and tiny kids in the countryside are singing and jumping and dancing and getting the message. Those are future Haacaaluus. Hundreds and thousands and millions of them in the countryside. That empire is not going to continue while those kids are growing up. So those are the bright, brilliant future, despite the death, despite the tragedy of Haacaaluu's murder. His message has caught fire, wildfire. It's spreading throughout the country. So those things I would have liked to see. The other piece is, for me, as a person, the connection to prison is very, very important, because I too learned, I was sharpened in prison, and how Haacaaluu, for Haacaaluu, prison was his university. So that really is another connection for me, and that's how I got my sharpening in prison, in the university of the prison. The other piece that I would have liked to see in that film is, I think it comes across as though the people who were, the Oromos who were displaced and dispossessed and evicted from their ancestral land, came back because they didn't know what else to do and how else to live, so they came back to live. That I would have liked to see how they were, with the dispossession and displacement, how they have gone. They have moved, they have sought protection from other Oromos. They went to Arsi, from Arsi they went to Bale, to Borana, to Hararge. They had to run into every which direction where Oromos were. They went away to look for kith and kin. They went for protection. They went for sheltering to other Oromos, which may be actually the basis for uniting the Pan-Oromo movement. It may be the seed. Although dispossessed and evicted and displaced, that displacement itself has created a new form of emplacement and a new form of coming together of people, of Oromos, as a nation. I think I would have liked to see that. They just didn't come back and live in poverty or whatever. Yes, some did come back, but some went and they were dispersed throughout the Oromo land. Those are the things that I would have liked to see if I were making the film. But I'm not making it. But if you ask me, one thing that really touched me is what Gabbani said in her, where Haacaaluu's work was going. I always asked myself, why does Haacaaluu mobilize people in such power? What gives him the power? Where does that power come from? I always go back to how he touches people very deeply and at the level of spiritual being, at the very depth of their spirituality. And that is the love for Mother Earth. Its earth care is tangentially, Abani touched on it very tangentially, but it's for me, what's missing in all the political analysis. Yes, I'm not in the film now, but I'm just giving my own assessment of his work. People, Oromos and others, have analyzed it. Haacaaluu's work is very political, it's very cultural, deeply spiritual as well, and that aspect is missing in any analysis, and I would like to highlight that aspect, because the power of the art is also something that touches very deep into the ineffable, into the things that you can't put to words, the feelings, the deep feelings that you feel but you can't express in words, the irrational, the illogical, that deeply you feel it in your body but you can't express. That's where Haacaaluu's work reaches people, and that's why it catches fire immediately and people are mobilized. And I think in one of his songs, in Haacaaluu really changed our relationship with the land. Malanjira, Haacaaluu's relationship to the land changes our relationship to the land, our relationship to Earth, to Mother Earth, and to the natural environment, really. In that sense, he is not separate from the earth, from the land. He bleeds with it. He cries with the earth, with the land. He is broken. His bones are broken. His blood is spilled. His entire being is mixed with the land, blurs with the land, and the land is him. The land is Haacaaluu, and Haacaaluu is the land. And when the land is torn, when the people are torn away from their ancestral land, he is torn. His body is torn. His bones are broken. Caccabseen na nyaatee jira. Ani maalan jira caccabseen na nyaatee jira. Ani hin jiru caccabseen na kukkute tiruu. Tiruu is the organ, the softest organ in the body. And the thing, the system, that empire that is breaking apart his people is breaking him apart. And it's not just breaking him and not just eating his flesh. It is cutting through to the softest organs like the liver, tiruko. And not just there, he's getting into the bone. Caccabsee na nyaate. Lafee caccabsee na nyaate. He has broken my entire body and being and eaten me up. That our relationship to the land is completely changed by that, at least for me. And that's what's missing in the analysis. The political, the cultural is analyzed very well, but the ontological, the cosmological aspect is not. And that's where I would like to take it in terms of my own assessment. And thank you for giving me this opportunity.